Most F1 drivers dream of long, legendary careers. But what happens when it ends before it even begins? This is the story of Yuji Ide, a racer who made it to Formula One only to be banned after just 4 races. What went wrong? And was it really all his fault? Yuji Ide's name is remembered in Formula One history for all the wrong reasons. His brief appearance in the 2006 season is often pointed out as one of the most unfortunate careers ever to happen in the sport. Just 4 races into his F1 debut, the Japanese driver was banned from competing any further, a move that sent shockwaves across the motorsport world. But to really understand how things went so wrong so fast, we have to look back at the path that brought Yuji Ide into Formula One. Born in Saitama, Japan, Yuji Ide didn't follow the usual European racing ladder that many F1 drivers do. Instead, he made a name for himself in domestic Japanese series like Formula Nippon and Japanese Formula 3. He wasn't a dominant force, but he was experienced. By the early 2000s, Ide had gathered a decent resume with consistent finishes and solid performances. What made him different from other rising stars was his age. By the time he entered F1, Ide was already in his early 30s, which is considered late for a rookie. But in Japan, where experience is often valued over youth, this wasn't seen as a disadvantage. At least not at first. Ide's big break came when Aguri Suzuki, a former Japanese F1 driver, decided to launch his own team, Super Aguri. The goal was to promote Japanese talent in Formula One, and for that, Suzuki needed a local driver who could represent Japan on the world stage. Yuji Ide fit that profile perfectly. He had experience, he had the nationality, and he had strong backing from Japanese sponsors. It was a symbolic move more than a competitive one, but the hope was that with enough track time, Ide could adapt and improve. However, Formula One is not a place for on-the-job training. The margin for error is small, and every move is analyzed. When Ide made his debut at the Bahrain Grand Prix in 2006, it became clear that he was struggling. From the first practice sessions, he was significantly slower than his teammate Takuma Sato, who had already spent a few seasons in F1. While Sato managed to bring the car home and gather data for the team, Ide was constantly off the pace. He spun several times, missed braking points, and couldn't keep up with the rest of the grid. At this point, some critics started to question whether he had enough preparation for the sport. After all, Yuji Ide had limited testing before the season began. Super Aguri was a brand new team, running outdated equipment, and lacked the resources of a top-tier team. In a way, Ide was set up for a difficult start. But even then, the gap between him and the rest of the field was hard to ignore. In modern Formula One, teams expect their drivers to adapt quickly, even under pressure. Unfortunately, things didn't get better. The real tipping point came at the San Marino Grand Prix, the 4th race of the season. During the opening lap, Ide attempted an overtake on Dutch driver Christian Albers. The move was aggressive and poorly timed. As a result, Albers' car was flipped upside down in a dangerous crash that could have ended badly. Thankfully, no one was seriously hurt, but the incident raised serious concerns. The FIA, the sport's governing body, had already been monitoring Ide's performance. After this crash, they had to take action. What followed was a decision rarely seen in modern motorsport. The FIA officially revoked Yuji Ide's super license, the special license required to compete in Formula One. This wasn't a suspension or a warning. It was a complete ban. The message was clear. Ide was not safe to continue racing at this level. For any driver, such a decision is devastating. For Yuji Ide, it marked the end of a dream that had barely begun. The reaction from the motorsport community was mixed. Some believed the FIA had no choice. The crash at Imola was too serious to ignore, and Ide's lack of pace had already put him under scrutiny. Others argued that he had been thrown into the deep end without proper support. Super Aguri was underfunded, used outdated cars, and didn't give him enough testing. In other words, they felt that the team, not just the driver, shared the blame. There's also the cultural angle. In Japan, public criticism is handled differently. Yuji Ide remained quiet during this time, avoiding the media spotlight. He didn't give interviews or speak out against the decision. He simply stepped back and accepted the ruling. To many, that humility was a sign of professionalism. But it also meant his side of the story was never fully told. What was clear, though, was that the F1 paddock had moved on quickly. After his F1 license was revoked, Ide returned to racing in Japan. He went back to Formula, Nippon and Super GT, where he had previously shown his skills. There, he was once again a competitive driver. He didn't win championships, but he raced well and without controversy. This added a strange twist to his story. In Japan, he was still respected as a solid professional, but to the rest of the world, his name became a cautionary tale, often mentioned when discussing drivers who weren't ready for Formula One. Some experts have tried to analyze why things went wrong for Ide. Was it lack of talent? Not likely. He had proven himself in other series. Was it age? Perhaps at 31, the adaptability needed in F1 might not have come easily. Was it the team? Certainly, Super Aguri didn't have the resources to give him what he needed. But maybe the real answer is that Formula One has become so competitive, so demanding, that even a small weakness gets exposed instantly. There is no room for slow improvement. Yuji Ide's case also highlights the importance of preparation. In other racing series, drivers spend months, sometimes years, adjusting to new cars and tracks. They go through simulator training, private tests, and long practice sessions. In 2006, Super Aguri didn't have those luxuries. Their cars were old, their budget was thin, and their drivers had limited testing. In that environment, even a small mistake could become a headline, and for Ide it did. Despite everything, Yuji Ide never expressed bitterness. He kept racing. He stayed involved in motorsport. He never blamed others, never tried to rewrite history. In fact, when asked years later about his time in F1, he said he was grateful for the chance. That attitude earned him respect, even from those who had once criticized him. It's easy to laugh at failure, but much harder to face it with dignity. In that sense, Yuji Ide did what many couldn't. Today, when fans talk about Formula One's biggest flops, Yuji Ide's name sometimes appears. But that's only one side of the story. Yes, his F1 career lasted only 4 races. Yes, he was banned in a way few others have been. But he also represented a dream that many drivers around the world share, to compete at the very highest level. For a brief moment, Yuji Ide lived that dream. And while it ended too soon, it was real. His story also serves as a reminder to teams and organizers about responsibility. When a driver is placed in a high-pressure environment without the proper tools or preparation, failure becomes likely and dangerous. It's not enough to give someone a chance. You have to make sure they're ready. In 2006, that lesson came at a high cost. And that brings us to the final thought. Was Yuji Ide really the worst F1 driver ever, as some headlines have claimed? Or was he simply in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong car? Maybe the truth lies somewhere in between. What's certain is that his story continues to be told, not just as a warning but as a reflection on how the sport treats its newcomers. 4 years after his brief appearance in Formula One, Yuji Ide's story remained a talking point. Not just because of what happened to him, but because of what it revealed about the sport itself. In the highly polished, ultra-professional world of F1, his case stood out as a rare moment of vulnerability, a reminder that even at the highest level, mistakes in judgment can be made, not just by drivers, but by teams, sponsors, and governing bodies as well. As Super Aguri continued in the 2006 season, they replaced Ide with Frank Montagnier, more experienced test driver with prior F1 mileage. The results improved only slightly, highlighting again that the car itself was not competitive. Even Takuma Sato, with his years of experience, struggled to finish consistently in the points. This confirmed what many already suspected, that Yuji Ide was not the only weak link. The entire operation had been rushed, underfunded, and overpromised. Still, Ide's absence was quietly noted in Japan. The media treated the issue delicately. While international headlines called him the worst F1 driver in history, Japanese outlets were more cautious, focusing on the lack of preparation and equipment. Among fans at home, there was a sense of regret, not just for what Ide had lost, but for how the opportunity was mishandled. In the years that followed, Ide continued to race in Japan. He found his way back into familiar territory with Super GT and Formula Nippon, now Super Formula. And while he never dominated those series, he regained a sense of stability and dignity that had been shaken by his F1 experience. The teams in Japan knew him, respected him, and understood his strengths. In that environment, he could perform without the crushing pressure of worldwide expectations. Interestingly, as the years passed, some motorsport fans began to look at his F1 story with more sympathy. Online forums and documentaries began to explore what happened behind the scenes, the lack of testing, the late signing, the outdated car. Many began to question why the FIA had not taken action sooner to ensure that Super Aguri had enough preparation before entering the sport. Why allow a team and a driver to enter such a competitive field without basic infrastructure? This debate opened up broader questions. How does Formula One balance opportunity with safety? Is it fair to promote talent based on sponsorship and nationality alone, especially when the performance gap can be dangerous? And most importantly, does the sport offer enough support to those who are struggling? In Yuji Ide's case, the answer to that last question appears to be no. Still, Ide never became bitter. That is perhaps the most surprising part of the story. Most athletes, when faced with public failure on a global stage, either disappear or push back hard. Ide did neither. He quietly returned to his home country, rejoined the local racing community, and carried on. He didn't seek revenge, didn't criticize the FIA, and didn't make excuses. That quiet resilience became his legacy, not just in Japan, but for motorsport fans who admired his humility. Even now, nearly 2 decades later, his name comes up every now and then, sometimes as a punchline in F1 trivia, other times as a case study in what can go wrong when ambition outpaces preparation. But occasionally, it comes up as a reminder that everyone who makes it to the starting grid, no matter how long they last, has overcome incredible odds just to be there. For all the young drivers dreaming of reaching Formula One, Yuji Ide's story is more than a warning. It's a mirror. It shows how thin the line is between success and failure, between being a national hero and being quietly forgotten. And yet, even in his brief career, Ide showed traits that many great drivers also need: courage, self-awareness, and the ability to move on without bitterness. In a way, he became a quiet icon, not for speed or results, but for grace under pressure, for continuing to race after being judged by millions, for returning to his roots and still finding a place in the sport he loved. Today, motorsport has changed. Teams are more careful with rookie selections. Drivers go through longer development programs. Testing is better organized, and simulator training plays a much larger role. It's unlikely that a situation like Yuji Ide's would happen again in quite the same way. But his experience played a role in shaping that progress. His 4 races became a lesson, one that the sport thankfully seems to have learned from. So yes, Yuji Ide's F1 career was short, but it wasn't meaningless. It was a reminder that talent needs time, that preparation matters, that every decision in Formula One, from team strategy to driver selection, has real consequences, and most of all, that failure in public doesn't mean failure in life. And perhaps that's what makes his story worth telling. Liked the story? Hit subscribe for more untold F1 moments and forgotten drivers. Got a topic in mind? Drop it in the comments.